Welcome to SVG-TV's news for Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. I'm Triska Campbell with the details. After a mere 3 days of debate on some members of the government and the opposition on the 2024 appropriation bills, or the National Budget 2024 was approved by Parliament after midday today, viewed as one of the shortest budget debates ever in the country's Parliament. In wrapping up the budget debate, which at times had heated exchanges between members of the government and the opposition, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Information Technology Camilla Gonsalves said there has been some errors and misunderstandings about what is in the budget, which he would like to put into better perspective. One of the issues highlighted by the minister, which he said has been erroneously reported, is a 25% increase in motor vehicle license fees. He said while it was an honest mistake, all around the increases are far more modest than have been reported.
We had in the budget, Madam Speaker, indicated that motor and driver's license fees would be increased. And that is a fact. But in the budget, while we correctly indicated in the appendix to the speech, while we correctly indicated what the new fees would be, we did not correctly indicate what the current fees or the old fees are. So we had reported to you, instead of, the last time we raised the fees was in 2016, but instead of putting the old 2016 fees in one column, we put 2008 fees in the column. So the jump looked bigger than it actually was. So people said, oh my goodness. And I said that it is understandable that the people had this particular position. This is what I'm saying. So just to clarify the point, Madam Speaker, and I want it to be clarified. There are increases in motor vehicle and driver's licenses, but those increases are not as large as has been reported. That's the point I want to make. For example, the motor vehicle for your private motor car, which would be the largest one, most people have a private motor car. The increase is from $455 to $500. So it's a $45 increase. It had been reported that it's a $100 increase, but that is not correct. It is, in actuality, a $45 increase. And that, so instead of a 25% increase, it's really about a 9% increase in the fees. The fees for motorcycles goes from $230 to $250. So that's a $20 increase. The fees for goods vehicles of less than 2 tons goes from $1,000 to $1,095. So there are fee increases, but there are not the 25% fee increases that were reported. And I want the public to know that the erroneous column, which initially contributed to this confusion and this misinformation, is being corrected.
The finance minister said Budget 2024 provides a lot to the people who have to look at both sides of the equation and what they will be getting from the budget, which he said will be of benefit to everyone and the country.
Start, Madam Speaker, with the lifting of the standard deduction, the standard income tax deduction. Again, erroneously, when we talked about raising the income tax reduction, people heard raising income tax and not raising the income tax deduction. And so there's some reports that income tax has been raised when actually the opposite has taken place. We have, for most people, reduced the amount of income tax that you'll be paying because we've raised the deduction, the standard deduction. 2 years ago, the standard deduction was $20,000. That means that the first $20,000 that you made didn't attract tax. And then every dollar you made after that attracted tax. So 2 years ago, if you made, what does that work out to? About $1,800 a month. If you made that, you didn't pay taxes. But if you made more than that, you paid taxes on the extra money. We raised it last year to $22,000, which meant that the first $22,000 that you made didn't attract taxes. For everybody who works. And then this year, budget 2024, we move it again from $22,000 to $25,000. So that means now that the first $2,000 and change dollars you make a month, if you're working, will not attract income tax. And that has a real benefit for you. That movement is going to, let us say that you make more than $2,000 a month. That means that the lifting of that threshold is going to save you over the course of the year $800. So, yes, there's a $45 increase on your motor vehicle license, but there's also an $800 savings on your income taxes. And that is something that we have to pay attention to.
Reiterating that Budget 2024 is not only people-centered but directly benefiting the bottom line pockets of people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Minister Gonsalves made specific mention of the increase in the minimum wages, which he said is important for the lives and livelihoods of low-wage workers in the country.
A couple of days ago, again on the internet, there was a big brouhaha about what some hotelier was going to pay some workers. Oh my goodness, they're going to pay them $800 a month. Ridiculous. Now, what wasn't said in that was that that was for the period between January and the opening in March. And what also wasn't said in that was that those same people were going to get an $800 bonus per month at the end of each month. So that would have actually, that $800 would have been $1,600. But I set that aside. That's not my argument to have. That's the private sector entity and the public. But people were saying, look, $800 a month for hotel workers. What's going to be done about that? Well, here's something that's going to be done about it. We're raising the minimum wage well beyond $800. So nobody working full-time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines can be paid $800 because it would be against the law of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to make $800. So, Madam Speaker, the room attendant who was previously, the previous minimum wage for that room attendant was $700 a month. It's now $1,000 a month. Their salary has been increased by $300 a month at a minimum under the law of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The guest services person is now up to $1,368 a month. The cooks are up to $1,200 a month. And so everybody across the board in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who was previously a minimum wage worker is getting more money because of Budget 2024.
Leader of the opposition, Dr. Godwin Friday, said the 2024 national budget, which is the largest ever, totaling $1.6 billion, is just hype like previous presentations made by the finance minister, noting that the budget is constructed to look good rather than deliver.
On the other side of the house, they will tell you that this is the biggest budget ever, and therefore it must be the best budget ever. Because, you know, bigger is better in the government camp. But, as we know from budgets from the past, much of it is hype. And I will demonstrate. The estimates upon which the minister's remarks yesterday are based are prepared to add up, to balance, not to implement. Madam Speaker, as we said in the estimates debate last month, there is so much sloppiness and laziness in the presentation of this document in some of the ministries, where large sections of the document, there is no information that is supposed to be key information, key indicators. This happened in the finance minister's own ministry. And if you look at pages 187 to 251, and page 243, and page 237, these all fall under his ministry. You will see what I'm talking about. So if these indicators are not worth filling in, why are they worth putting in the document in the first place? What is the point? What are they intended to do? Is this an exercise just in sleight of hand or showmanship or propaganda? Or is it a serious document that presents the state of affairs in the country, that holds the ministers and the ministries accountable for what is presented here this year, to say this is how we have managed over the course of the year to achieve or not achieve them, and to explain why? In the minister's reading, however, of his presentation yesterday, and a slick presentation, it was intended to gloss over these deep flaws. But it isn't working, Madam Speaker. I mentioned them here though, only to briefly because it is to show that much of what they say in the budget has not been given a lot of thought. Yes, there are some key things that they're focusing on. The port modernization project, perhaps. But there's a lot of stuff in there that they just basically go through the motions.
Dr. Friday further told Parliament that the government continually increased the budget, but failed to implement the budget because they do not have the money to do so.
On the other side of the House, they will tell you that this is the biggest budget ever, and therefore it must be the best budget ever. Because, bigger is better in the government camp. But, as we know from budgets from the past, much of it is hype. And I will demonstrate. The estimates upon which the minister's remarks yesterday are based are prepared to add up, to balance, not to implement. Madam Speaker, as we said in the estimates debate last month, there is so much sloppiness and laziness in the presentation of this document in some of the ministries, where large sections of the document there is no information that is supposed to be key information, key indicators. This happened in the finance minister's own ministry. And if you look at pages 187 to 251, and page 243, and page 237, these all fall under his ministry. You will see what I'm talking about. So if these indicators are not worth filling in, why are they worth putting in the document in the first place? What is the point? What are they intended to do? Is this an exercise just in sleight of hand or showmanship or propaganda? Or is it a serious document that presents the state of affairs in the country, that holds the ministers and the ministries accountable for what is presented here this year, to say this is how we have managed over the course of the year to achieve or not achieve them, and to explain why? In the minister's reading, however, of his presentation yesterday, and a slick presentation, it was intended to gloss over these deep flaws. But it isn't working, Madam Speaker. I mentioned them here though, only to briefly because it is to show that much of what they say in the budget has not been given a lot of thought. Yes, there are some key things that they're focusing on. The port modernization project, perhaps. But there's a lot of stuff in there that they just basically go through the motions.
While acknowledging that some things were delivered in last year's budget, the opposition leader reminded his colleagues in Parliament that a budget is a complete package, and once promises made, delivery is expected unless there is exigent circumstances.
You know what is more egregious? They make these promises deliberately, knowing that they cannot be fulfilled. They know they will not collect the money because they have failed to collect even 5% in that category of capital receipts called other receipts over the years. In fact, the audit report for 2019 at page 40, Madam Speaker, indicates that out of $198 million in 2019 in other receipts that the minister said that they would collect in order to implement their programs, they only collected $3 million. That was less than 1% of the revenue. Namiseso is the director of audit. You see? And so if you're only collecting less than 1% of that large sum, how are you going to deliver? I mean, that's logic. Unless, of course, there is something else at play. Unless, of course, there is something else that is intended to do. And if that's the case, you should say so and don't leave it up to people to deduce. And if they know that they would not collect the money, they must also know that they can't be delivering on those promises. Yet they do it anyway. Year after year, the budget is inflated, and more, they try to convince the people that on the basis of that, because it's bigger every year, you're making progress. Because if you're increasing the size, you must be making progress. And they think, of course, even when we call them out on it, that they could do it because they think they could fool the people all the time. But as the saying goes, you well know that you can't fool all the people all the time. And our people know that fool me once, shame on me. Fool me again, fool me once, shame on you. You're right. Thank you. You see, you're very well familiar with it, so you know very well what you're doing. Exactly. Thank you.
Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Sabota Caesar, described Budget 2024 as a budget of opportunities. Making his contribution to the budget debate in Parliament last evening, Minister Caesar outlined some of the opportunities that the economy will benefit from, including new hotels and other projects.
There is a vibe in the country, a very positive vibe with energy. And it was a few days ago I was driving into Kingstown, just passing the Argyle International Airport, and when I looked at the number of jets at Argyle, linking St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because of a conscious decision by the Unity Labour Party administration to construct the Argyle International Airport, now we have gone global. You're seeing the positive change in the face of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Not to talk about the construction of the Holiday Inn. Not to speak about the investments right there in Diamond, the hardware, the pharmacy, the restaurants which are going up, Maya Suite, the supermarkets. So when we sit here and we listen to the presentation from the other side, we listen to the presentation of the leader of the opposition, all doom and gloom, we are seeing a different reality here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Minister Caesar further thanked God for giving the Unity Labour Party administration foresight and vision to lead the country in challenging times.
And Madam Speaker, there are many challenges, but there's something called a track record. And when persons are listening, and they listen to the debate, when they listen to this side of the house, they know that the Unity Labour Party, we have a track record that they can trust. When we speak about track record, let us roll back the curtains. Not too long ago, when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, when you saw the long lines for food throughout the Caribbean, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we sat down and we decided to come up with something creative. And we were able to avoid those long lines, take pressure off the people, and we had food boxes going around from house to house throughout the length and breadth of this country.
Meanwhile, opposition Senator Shavon John said Vincentians will have to dig deeper in their pockets to finance Budget 2024. In making her contribution to the budget debate yesterday, John said the government is giving Vincentians with one hand and taking it back with the other.
To the estimates, and I realize that on Roman numeral 1, our tax revenue, there is an increase in our tax revenue. And our non-tax revenue, it has decreased for the year 2024. What that is saying to us, and it was well articulated yesterday, that many Vincentians still have to dig deeper into their pockets to finance this budget. It is simple. Government gain their revenue from taxes. Yes, and also from non-taxes. And if we are gaining more revenue from the tax instead of the non-tax, it applies to individuals. So it applies in terms of your income tax, and in what we see here, increase in driver's license, increase in motor vehicle license, and other tax reforms that we are seeing.
The opposition senator also described Budget 2024 as missed opportunities and unwillingness of the government to acknowledge what is really happening across St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Increasing poverty, unemployment still being high. Many people are still suffering, Madam Speaker. Single parents can't buy bread for their children to go to school. We are faced with those issues, and we must face reality. Every one of us knows what is happening within our constituencies. The high rise in inflation and cost of living means, Madam Speaker, that the purchasing power of the dollar reduces. When there is inflation, your dollar has no value, basically. What you can buy decreases, and we see it, Madam Speaker. You go to the supermarket with $300 and you come out with basically one plastic bag.
John further told Parliament that while the budget allocates monies to reduce poverty, the government has failed to do a poverty assessment in the country. The debate on the 2024 national budget was wrapped up quickly today after no one from the government and opposition rose to make their contribution when calls by the Speaker for further debate were made. Members of the opposition hosted a news conference this afternoon to speak on the issue. Opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday said while there are some discussions as to how the matter actually transpired, what is extraordinary is that only 2 other ministers spoke on the budget, and that the Prime Minister, who was in Parliament at the time this morning, chose not to speak on the budget of his government.
Extraordinary set of developments. I don't know if that, I don't think that has ever happened in the history of this country. We have had early wrap-up of the debates in the past by this government, but at the time the Prime Minister was the Minister of Finance, so he would have spoken to defend his government's presentation of the budget. But this time, he did not rise to do that. That is contemptuous of the people of this country. How can you take the budget seriously when the minister presents and the Prime Minister is present and does not address what is presented? Does not seek to explain, even though the minister himself had said that there were certain issues, security and crime, for example, that he didn't deal with in any great extent because the Prime Minister, Minister of National Security, was going to deal with them. And as we all know, crime is out of control in this country. It's one of the most serious matters confronting the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we did not get a response. Any elaboration on the fleeting remarks that were made by the Minister of Finance in his presentation, we did not get such from the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security. We have to ask ourselves, what is going on? How seriously do they take this process? How much respect do they have for the people of this country? Why is it that this occurred in the Parliament today, that no member on the government side, that is to say the ministers who are responsible to present, to elaborate on the programs that are presented by the Minister of Finance, did not rise to do so?
Dr. Friday said members of the opposition were willing to speak on the budget, but the opportunity did not arise for them to do so because of the premature termination of the debates.
As I said, it is the obligation of the government through ministers to present the plans for the year ahead and to seek to explain and to defend them in light of anything that the opposition, you, the members of the media, or the general public, the ordinary people, the taxpayers, the people they are supposed to represent. Any questions they might have, any comments they might make. And since there are tax increases in this budget, all the more reason for them to come and seek to explain them. Tuesday morning, we well know, it was a rough day. Tuesday was a rough day. And Wednesday morning, this morning, was a rough time for the government because it took a lot of flack, a lot of criticism for what the minister presented on Monday evening. The reaction to the budget, tax increases, that is in vehicle licensing fees, in particular conductor fees, and the half measures that were presented. The reaction was clearly not what the government had hoped for. There was a lot of pushback and criticism of what they were doing. Because the people of this country, quite rightly, had seen through and continue to see through what was in the budget. What is there for them was more pain and hardship, more costs, no empathy for the suffering and the hardship that people are feeling. Because the minister, as I said in my presentation yesterday, presented a budget that seemed to paint a picture of a country that none of us in the parliament, except for them, I don't even know if they did, recognized. Or that people of this country can associate what he was saying with what was happening around them on a daily basis.
The opposition leader said the government, and in particular the Prime Minister, needs to come to the people and explain themselves.
People should be asking, demanding a proper explanation as to why their budget was not properly presented. Why members of the government sat on their side of the House and did not deliver in the manner that the member for East Kingston said is their requirement, that the requirement to do under the law, that they failed to do. The people of this country must hold them accountable. If the government is tired, as it clearly is, running out of ideas, as it clearly is, then it is time for them to go. Call an election, free the people of this slide that is happening in every aspect of life in this country.
Local meteorological forecaster Gregory Cato said based on the 1991 to 2020 climatological data, an 80% chance of at least 3 sets of 7 days dry spell can be expected between January and March this year. In an interview with SVG-TV News, Cato said dry days are considered when there is less than 1 millimeter of rainfall and that more dry spells will increase the possibility of wildfire occurrences.
Classify dry spells as 7 days with this condition, or 10 days or 15 days. Now, based on the climatological data, which comes from 1991 to 2020, there's an 80% chance of at least a 7-day dry spell within the specified period between January to March 2024. Our historical average suggests that we have 2 on average, and the maximum we'd ever had was between 6 to 7. Now, as it relates to 15 days, there's a 50% chance you can have at least 1 15-day dry spell, and the max over the period would have been between 1 to 2, whereas with the 10-day, we just have nothing is forecast in terms of how many 10 days dry spells we can have within this period. But climatologically speaking, we've had on average at least 1. And of course, the more dry spells, of course, this would increase the likelihood, or the possibility, I should say, for wildfire occurrences.
Cato said the period under review will be a good one for the tourism sector, with less rainfall anticipated and visitors can enjoy more outdoor activities. He, however, warned of the possibility of strong sea swells during the dry season. The meteorological forecaster also used the opportunity to encourage farmers to cultivate more climate-resilient crops that can withstand the dry season.
We are asking you to be advised on the frequency of rough sea swells that could take place around this time of year. And hoteliers should be mindful of the possibility of drought in some areas and plan accordingly. To ensure food security, now we strongly advise these persons to make preparations to employ conservation and irrigation practices. As it relates to health, diseases, or I should say morbidity from high temperatures in the region is not so much an issue between December and February. However, anti-mosquito fogging should continue because there are areas where there's stagnant water after some showers. These are things that could promote mosquito breeding, and we wouldn't want a situation where we eventually end up with an outbreak. And the Saharan dust issue, we expect less frequent episodes of Saharan dust, and this would reduce the risk of exacerbating respiratory illness in susceptible persons. For the water sector, we would advise the CWSA, or the Water Authority, to strongly monitor the water situation and to continue that excellent job in urging the public to conserve water. The public, we need your help as well, because these leaks that are around, wherever there are leaks, we are advising the persons, urging persons to ensure that they report these leaks so that the authority can immediately repair them to avoid wastage during this dry season.
Kate also noted that they are expecting the air temperature to be above average for the next 3 months, which he said are based on the 30-year climatological data from the E.T. Joshua between 1991 and 2020. In other news, the progress is being made by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in its quest to establish an electronic single window for e-trade facilitation, or eSwift, under the Digital Transformation Project. On radio on Tuesday, project coordinator Winston George said the implementation of eSwift is expected to cost the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines $2,338,400 United States dollars. He said the system is expected to be fully implemented by June 2026. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and the government of SVG have agreed to cooperate in the area of business facilitation by establishing an electronic single window for trade facilitation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The eSwift will provide greater efficiency through reliable digital services that seek to ensure higher compliance, transparency, and ease doing business relevant to the import and export of goods in and out of the country.
Critical item we have is what we call the electronic single window for trade facilitation. Essentially, this is allowing a single entry point for at the customs for like licenses, permits, certificates of origin for the import and export of goods, right? We have signed a contract of US $2.34 million with UNCTAD, and we would be in implementation from this month. UNCTAD soon would be on the ground to work with the various stakeholders. Now, this single window will affect 16 border agencies. When I say border agencies, so for example, in agriculture, you want to export or import agricultural commodities, you have to provide phytosanitary certificate, import permits, and so all these would be uploaded at a single entry point.
On making a transaction under the Digital Transformation Project as opposed to using a different platform, John said the digital transformation on experience will be similar. However, in terms of a payment platform, there will be various modes of digital payments.
Of the payment platform, there will be different types of ways that you could make payments. So you could have your debit and credit card. You could also have your different text payments, whatever. You could also have your transfers for payments and so forth. So there are different modes of making payment. Under the project, we are addressing the whole matter of change management. So we would want to take people along as we go in terms of, making sure they understand how to do. And surely, I mean, you talk techno-peasant, etc. We have what you call we know we have the digital divide and so on. So we would have to cater for that to ensure that our citizens could access the information.
The Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force is notifying the public not to donate any money to fill its hamlet of Beckway. According to the police, hamlet is going about Kingston and other communities soliciting funds from people via sponsor sheets purportedly to pursue studies at the Astronomy University. The police say this is bogus and that Hamlet was detained and questioned about the matter and was advised to desist from doing such, but he continues to. Persons who may have donated monies with Hamlet and feel aggrieved are encouraged to contact the Criminal Investigations Department at 457-1211.